I'm now joined by Thulisile Phiri for the next Coffee with the Editor session. Thuli has a rail background and is now the founder and MD of African Storyteller, which celebrates 2 years. Thuli, thank you for taking the time to join me.
Thank you, Philippa. Good to see you.
So, the African Storyteller, it's now in its second year.
Absolutely.
You come from the rail industry. I've worked with you as marketing and communications over the years. You now have the African Storyteller. How did it come about?
So, Philippa, thank you again for having me. And the African Storyteller is really, a brainchild that I've had for quite a long time. Just having worked in corporates, traveled the world, and really trying to build brands for multinational companies. The one consistent thing was that Africa's story was not accurately told. It was actually told from a perspective of people that are outside of the continent reflecting inwards and saying this is who Africa is. And it made me realize that actually our stories of growth, our stories of potential, and our stories of Africans that are just working hard, doing well, highly skilled, credible leaders are really lacking in the main. The continent was really portrayed as corruption-riddled, as a poverty-riddled continent, and as a place where it's really that hard to do business. But guess what? Having built so many brands over the past 20 years or so, I actually know for a fact that this is a continent that has a lot of opportunity, that has a lot of positive stories that could really inspire the world, that could really bring more investment into the continent, that continue to be undertold. But underpinning all of that, I think it's really the importance of connecting these investors with decision makers so that there's actually alignment in terms of how do we take the continent forward. So for example, if a company comes to invest in South Africa, do they understand what the country is trying to achieve as outlined in the National Development Plan? If they try to invest in Kenya, do they actually understand what Kenya is trying to actually achieve as outlined in their country development plan, and so on and so forth. So the African Storyteller really was born out of wanting to tell African stories of growth from an African perspective to Africa and to the world.
So you've worked with a couple of brands, big brands, where I have engaged with you. But what are the other markets aside from rail that you're serving?
So the African Storyteller really is serving clients in key sectors of our economy across Africa. So we work in financial services. For instance, our client there is a company called Minet Holdings, and we've actually supported them to launch their brand in 7 African countries just late last year. And we also work in the health sector with Gilead Sciences, which is a big pharmaceutical company. We work in rail transportation with Transmit Holding, and also they're actually a big rail company. They're the 4th biggest in the world and the biggest in Russia. And we also work in mining with Exxaro, which is the biggest coal mining company in South Africa and one of the biggest brands when you actually talk mining in the whole continent.
How does the African Storyteller bring about or bring that brand to life?
Well, I think in 2 ways really. I think one is really understanding what does the company want to achieve as a company and connecting that with how it then translates to delivering impact to the country and to the ordinary citizens of that particular country and broader to Africa. And then secondly, I think it's really connecting the dots and making sure that companies are not shy to tell their stories of how they're impacting those economies, but most importantly that they are developing and building relationships with decision makers and stakeholders that are robust, that are actually tackling issues, and that are actually meant at finding that common objective, that common thread, that together, partnering as private sector, public sector, civic organizations can actually help deliver impact to ordinary communities, to ordinary companies like us, for instance, small companies, to ordinary citizens of a country, and really broader to making Africa and the various regional trading blocks to be competitive.
Why is it so important to tell the story? I find, especially in heavy industrial environments, I'm in niche publication, the clients that I work with go, we don't want to tell too much, we don't want to give too much away. Why is it important to communicate?
Very simple. I think think if you don't own your story, somebody else will own your story. There's an African proverb that says, unless the lion learns to hunt, the story will always favor the hunter. And really, in a simplified way, unless you are able to articulate what you're about, who you are, and what your relevance in the broader context of society is, people will always have different versions of who you are. In an environment where information or content continues to be king and continues to be key, it is actually important to own your own narrative such that your stakeholders and your different audiences know your story from your perspective. Otherwise, your story basically will have multiple perspectives, multiple versions of it, and you will not definitely have a strong and credible identity.
So what is your advice for the industrial or mining community, or even clients in the rail sector? What's your advice?
I think the biggest advice that I would actually give is, one, you need to know your market. You know, it is just not good to know your work or to know your product or to deliver the world-class quality product. You need to understand what the market values. You need to actually understand the cultural nuances in each market and how they relate to the impact that you're delivering. And most importantly, you need to connect with your stakeholders. And your stakeholders include publications like your Railways Africa magazine. Your stakeholders could actually include the communities within which you operate. They could include government decision makers. They could include NGOs and other civic organizations. It is very important to answer the question, what is in it for me, for each of those stakeholders, and make them understand how your business, how your existence actually impact their lives, and what benefit they should actually try and derive from you, and also what benefit you're trying to derive from them.
So Thuli, having been in the marketing and communication space for many years outside of having your own business, how have you seen the transformation in terms of new technology, the bridge between traditional public relations and new media? How have you seen that develop?
Initially we started seeing everybody moving towards new media. And I think where we stand today is that companies and big brands are realizing that there's a place for traditional and there's a place for new media. And I think a mix between the two and finding that perfect balance where they both enhance each other is very important. For example, with the advent of social media, information is instant. You know, this particular interview that you and I are doing cannot only be confined to a particular market. You know, information is now borderless. It's actually global. So it's quite like important to tell your story with understanding that you're not telling it to a local audience, to an African audience, or only to a global audience, but you're telling it to the world. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is companies need to actually move with the times. You know, brands that have actually succeeded, to our earlier conversation before we started this particular interview, are brands that are actually allowing themselves to almost reinvent how they actually communicate. You know, you can no longer ignore platforms like your social media, you know, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. When this platform started, they were actually seen more as, you know, an individual sort of kind of like platform. But more and more corporate companies are realizing that if people are having conversations about you and you're absent in those conversations, you will always be in reactive mode. You might as well be proactive and provide the right information and really create an ambience where you have this platform that allows you to engage almost real time, back to back with your different audiences. So in that instance, you do realize that social media, or new media as we call it, and traditional media needs to actually find that perfect play of coexisting. Social media obviously is really kind of like limited in that it's quite quick, it's witty, it's not in-depth, and publications like Railway Africa magazine are still very, very relevant in that they are providing us with a platform where you talk more technical, you go deeper into the expert or the subject matter in a particular field, and in this particular instance it would actually be rail. And guess what? Some people still really like the feel of picking up a magazine like Railways Africa magazine and browsing through the pages and really keeping it for keepsake. I'm one of those people. So there's really a place for both traditional and new media in our current context, and I think that will be for a very long time.
So how do we demystify social media for the industrial or engineering firm? You know, they go, social media is for the kids, You know, what is a Twitter? You know,
I think the best way,
that's what they call it.
to actually demystify social media is to kind of like say, if Trump tweets, the whole world kind of like sneezes, or the whole world catches a flu, depending on whether his tweet is positive or negative. And this is probably the president of the biggest economy in the world. I mean, social media can no longer be ignored in the sense of it's for a particular audience, because I think history and past cases have actually taught us that social media is a revolution in itself. You know, if your brand is being conversed about in social media and you are not there to actually own the conversation, at times the damage could actually be too big for you to, you know, rebuild your brand after that. The case of Ford is one example, you know, where social media really mobilized against a particular brand where they felt it could have acted better, or with a better heart, or with better empathy, if I could put it that way. And also the opposite is true. You know, brands that have really done well and are praised in social media, they start to see their value in terms of their brand equity, in terms of loyalty, and so on and so forth. Industrial brands are actually no longer that different to consumer brands. In the past, you would find that companies are actually having conversations about industrial brands. But guess what? Consumers in the B2C space are having conversations about industrial brands today, because they realize that so long as you impact my life, so long as you touch my livelihood, and so long as you coexist with me in the same space, I almost have the right to have an opinion about you. And it is very much important for industrial brands to almost allow themselves to start appreciating, you know, the community that social media provides for them, to start appreciating that they are stakeholders, they are the decision makers, they are customers. In fact, guess what? I think everybody is actually in social media, willingly or unwillingly. The reality is, it is here, we can't ignore it, we have to embrace it, and we have to make it work for us. And my thing is, as you would do traditionally with executives, where you would take them through through media training, social media training has become so relevant and so important for executives, especially executives that are in industrious sort of industries or sectors of the economy.
How do you weight the new media? Do you have a preference? Is it LinkedIn, then Instagram, or LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook?
I think they're all serve very different purposes, and they're all very different to different audiences and to different messages. For instance, if you're in the rail sector, I think telling the rail story, it actually requires you to be more visual, because it is not a story of a product that people see every day. So if you're telling the impact of rail to the broader South Africa or to the broader Africa, I think it can be better told in terms of a visual context. So your Instagram would actually be relevant, your YouTube would actually be relevant. If you want to actually send out quick messages, you know, which kind of like share your ideas or your perspective as a company, or your strategic direction, or endorsement of, you know, like-minded stakeholders, I think Twitter, which is kind of like quick and brief and to the point, would actually be relevant. So I think using all of these platforms, you know, to serve different purposes of telling your message, of delivering your story, would actually be quite important. But personally, my preference is Instagram, because I just believe that, you know, in a world where we are so bombarded with so much messages and so much clutter, I still feel visual stories catch their attention, and they tell the story better and more powerfully than any other platform. So Instagram is my preference.
I've been following your Instagram, and you post such beautiful photos.
Thank you.
So the African Storyteller for the next 12 months?
So we actually have quite a lot planned for the next 12 months. In fact, for the next probably like 24 months, because most of the work that we actually are working on is really kind of like, you know, spread over 12, 24, 36 months. So we're finding that over and above the current work that we're doing for our clients, which is stakeholder relationship management, crisis communications management, brand positioning, and actually go-to-market strategies for the different clients that we have that are expanding into the continent, we are now being requested more and more to support investment opportunities dialogues. So we're looking forward to, over and above doing what we do, making sure that we host a number of investment summits and investment dialogues with a number of African countries that are looking to bring international investors into their markets and really leveraging the fact that we've got a wide network globally of people that are looking into coming into Africa and investing in the different sectors of Africa that we are actually operating in.
So when's your next event?
Well, if all goes well, we've got one coming up, a very big one for July. Fingers crossed. And I think that one will be one of the big summits that would actually benefit the different markets that we're working in. But in between that, we've got quite a number of smaller dialogues, around opportunities and investment in the region and across Africa that we are actually looking at doing for different clients.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thuli, I wish you all the best, and
Thank you, Philippa.
it's been fantastic to watch you grow into this amazing journey.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the continued partnership and support. We really appreciate it.